Good afternoon, everybody. For those that are here in the room, those that are on Zoom, those that are on Facebook, and those that will be on YouTube. We welcome all of you. A bunch of announcements to make before we get started. Today's sponsors of the class, Jeff and Lori Goldchin, are sponsoring in honor of Yom Yerushalayim and in memory of Rabbi Kotlarsky, who passed away yesterday, who was a giant amongst the Chabad movement in helping open many, many Chabad houses throughout the world. May his family be comforted amongst the mourners of Zion in Jerusalem. It's also sponsored by Eilat Gutman, sponsoring in the memory of her father, Israel Malki, and in memory of her brother, Dan Yeshayahu Malki. Their neshama should have an aliyah. They should go higher and higher in the heavenly worlds. And it's sponsored by Brian Goldenfeld, sponsoring in honor of our own Rabbi Levine. Thank you very much, Brian. Next Tuesday night begins the holiday of Shavuot. And it's by Jewish tradition that we stay up late into the night, Tuesday night, studying Torah to show our anticipation for the revelation of Sinai, which takes place on the first day of Shavuot. So there's always late night study that takes place. So I'm going to urge all of you to take a nap Tuesday sometime during the day. But do come out here 11 p.m. Tuesday evening. You can do it. You can do it. There's an entire junk food buffet. A lot of sugar served. There's also going to be a sushi buffet, a chocolate buffet, 11 o'clock. And we have some subjects of interest. I'll be giving a talk on hostage negotiations, navigating an impossible crisis, trying to look at Jewish law and Jewish tradition, what has been said over the past thousands of years when it comes to negotiating for hostages. It's a controversial talk.
So what time is that going?
11 o'clock? As long as you last. As long as you last. Then we have cots for you. It'll go all night, but you don't have to stay all night. So there's 3 lectures followed by all-night study. I'll be giving the first talk on hostage negotiations. Rabbi Label will be giving a talk on whose land is it anyway, exploring Jewish claims to the Holy Land. And my brother-in-law, Rabbi Morty Katz, will be giving a talk on Torah amidst turmoil, insights from the Holocaust. So that's all the subjects on Israel at war. Next Tuesday night, June 11th at 11 p.m. right here in this room. And again, take a little bit of a nap Tuesday. Come at 11. Stay as long as you can possibly stay. But do wake up Wednesday. You've been asking me if this is the last class of the semester. But you do come back next Wednesday. You just come back a little bit earlier. Services start at 10 o'clock. Now, if that's too early for you, that's fine. You can come at 11 o'clock. Still too early? Come by 11:30. I'll still let you in. 11:30, we're going to be reading the 10 Commandments, which is the focus of the holiday of Shavuot. We're going to relive the experience. There'll be a sermon after that. And then there will be a lunch. Now, I'm talking a lunch. The lunch will have pizza, lasagna, blin souffle, eggplant parmesan, enchiladas, fettuccine alfredo, I have no idea what that is, mac and cheese, pesto ravioli, cheese burritos, a salad bar, cheesecake, a fruit platter, and of course an entire ice cream bar with every topping you can think of. So, next Wednesday, yes, do come. Come an hour earlier, come at least 11:30. You want to come earlier, we let you in even earlier. But stay for the 10 Commandments, stay for the sermon, and stay for the lunch that will follow. Please spread the word to everyone else to please join us together here for the holiday of Shavuot. Now, that same day, Wednesday in the afternoon, for those that for some reason couldn't make it the morning, or for those that live either in the Old Agora area, Liberty Canyon, Lost Hills, we're doing a Shavuot service Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock. In the Old Agora community. That's on Driver Avenue. You have the flyer right here. For those that don't have the flyer that's listening to me, it's 28442 Driver Avenue. Or you can go onto the website chabadconejo.com/Old Agora and find out all the information about Shavuot in Old Agora. We look forward to having you join. One more announcement and we'll get started. First, Jacob, is there you have the ear control at your fingertips? See, Jacob told me earlier today, I said that I want him to give class today. And he said, no, I'm just the tech guy. And I said, no, you're far more than the tech guy. Let's hear it for Jacob. If it wasn't for Jacob, all of this would not be being put on Zoom, on Facebook, on YouTube. Thousands of people out there that join us for the classes and watch the classes afterwards, all thanks to this young man right here. It's a shame he's not on the camera, but Jacob Michelson has done a magnificent job all year. And now, with the touch of his little iPhone there, he's going to get a cooler in the room. It's that magical. You got it. Look at that. Okay, one more announcement. We're coming close to our annual gala event. That's June 18th. You have the invitations on the table in front of you. If you're watching this on your computer, whether now live or later on, go to chabadgala.com, chabadgala.com. We have a magnificent program this year at the Four Seasons Hotel. We're going to have a concert in honor of a Solidarity with Israel concert. We have Tony Orlando. Anyone remember Tony Orlando? He's going to be joining us. He's going to sing his hit song, Tie a Yellow Ribbon, in honor of the hostages, a prayer with the hostages. So you don't want to miss this gala event. We do ask if anyone here in this room or anyone listening out there would like to participate in the campaign, in the fundraising campaign, which helps keep the doors open, keep the programs going. If you haven't already done so, please go to chabadgala.com, make a contribution there in honor of both the campaign and in honor of all the work that we do throughout the entire year. Okay, let us begin. I remember seeing an article, this was before October 7th, by Alan Dershowitz. And he was responding to comments made by some members of Congress at the time, you could probably figure out who, that there's too much Jewish money and influence in Washington. And so he was responding to, quote unquote, we call them the squad, criticizing the Jewish influence. And the name of his article were, Are Jews Really Too Powerful? And it caught my eye. Obviously, if you saw that article, that editorial, you would read it as well. And his point was very interesting. What he said was that when he hears that Jews are too powerful, his response is, we're not powerful enough. When he hears that AIPAC is too influential, his response is that it's not influential enough. When he hears that Jews contribute too much money to their causes, he says we need to contribute more. When he hears that Jews control the media, he says, really, if that's the case, why is there so much media anti-Israel? Yeah. When he hears that Jews have too much influence on the outcome of elections, he says we need to increase our influence. The point of his article is we're not doing enough. We need to do much more. The fact that Jews have contributed immensely to America's success and to a large part to the world's success, be it in academia, in the world of science, in the world of medicine, in religion, in politics, economics, technology, or any other area vital to the human conditions, the Jewish people have had a disproportionately positive impact on the world. You just have to look at the percentage of Nobel Prize winners that are Jews. But you can look at so many other discoveries, so many other advances in human life over thousands of years. We have earned the right to act as first-class citizens. Any knowledgeable, honest, and key word there is honest, an objective student of history will acknowledge that so many of the concepts and ideals that civilizations now take for granted were not always the ways of the world. They weren't always the fabric of society until Judaism and the Jewish people introduced it to the world. Simple concepts like monotheism wasn't here until Abraham came along. Equal justice for all, the value of life, the value of a single life, the quest for peace. Oseh shalom bimromav, that we dream of peace. That peace is the ideal that we all strive for. The concept of a Sabbath day, whether it's Shabbat for us, Sunday for the world, but the idea that we don't work 7 days a week. The focus and importance of education. The idea of charity and giving and sharing. The idea of tikkun olam, that we have a responsibility to repair the world, to make the world a better place than it was when we entered the world. All of these ideas, all of these approaches were not only revolutionary when first introduced, they were at odds with conventional wisdom of their times. And it wasn't accepted right away. It took time, decades, sometimes hundreds of years, sometimes thousands of years, for the world to come around to embracing the wisdom offered by the family of Abraham. And this is something almost any respected non-Jewish historian will have to tell you. And yet, while the world was absorbing Jewish inventions, Jewish innovations into their culture, they were simultaneously persecuting and often attempting to destroy us. It was going on simultaneously. And ultimately, it was to their own detriment. The countries that kicked us out of their country did not benefit from the exit of the Jewish people. The opposite is what took place. Their economies collapsed. Their education system collapsed. Their innovations collapsed. For all the mayhem and the destruction the haters cause to us, they end up hurting themselves more than anyone else. If you look at the countries in Europe that declared that they wanted to be Judenrein, to get rid of all their Jewish populations, and you study how did they fare as a result. I remember there was an audience with, it was Yeltsin. Remember President Yeltsin from Russia was having a meeting in the White House with then President Senior Bush. And someone from the Jewish Federation was invited to this dinner as well. And they were thanking Yeltsin for allowing the Jews to leave. You know, after so many years of the Soviet Union, that he allowed Jews to exit. And what he asked the Jewish Federation was, how can we convince them now to come back? We spent so many years making life so difficult for the Jews that they all wanted to leave, whether to America, whether to Israel, wherever it was. We need them back. What can we do in our country to welcome them back so that they would want to live here? More recent times. Israel turns the Gaza Strip with Gush Katif and other Jewish settlements in 2005 over to the Palestinians. Controversial decision by then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, right? The whole Jewish world debated it, whether it was right, whether it was wrong. But they gave it over, that's the fact. And they schlepped out the settlers one by one. Militarily. And they gave over these beautiful buildings, these fertile greenhouses that grew beautiful vegetables and flowers, and a beautiful community. And they turned it over to them. And literally within hours, minutes of the IDF taking the last Jew out, what did they do to these beautiful settlements? What did they do to farmland? They burnt it to the ground. Burnt it down. Now, you talk about the life of the civilians of the Palestinians. We keep hearing about the civilians. This would have benefited the civilians. They would have made money off the selling of the produce that came from these fields. But no, it was touched by a Jew. Let's burn it to the ground. And then Gaza was turned into literally a missile base. All of Gaza turned into a missile base. We see it now. Schools and the hospitals turned into missile bases. What? To throw missiles into Israel. This is after giving them this gift. So you yell to the world. You keep talking about the occupation, the occupation. There was no occupation since 2005. You had it all. And instead of creating a peaceful, neighboring relationship, what did you do with it? It's It's because they were consumed by hatred, and they're still consumed by this hatred, that they destroyed resources that they could have used for themselves. And it's history repeating itself with acts of throwing Jews out of Europe, different countries, one by one. It's to their own detriment. So getting back to the article by Alan Dershowitz, too powerful? No. History has proven that Jews need more power and influence than any other group in order to secure our own safety. If we don't have that, we don't make it. During the 1930s and early 1940s, we had morality on our side, but we lacked the power and we lacked the influence to back up the moral standing. There was no Israel. We had little political influence in the United States, and the result of that weakness was catastrophic. And so we say, never again. Never again. In the Middle East, Israel must have more military power than all of its enemies combined. It's that simple. It can't be that Israel is stronger than one country. It has to be that Israel must retain the strength, the power, the might, the ammunition, that it's stronger than all the other countries in the Middle East combined. You know the famous statement, if Israel were to lay down its arms, there would be no Israel, God forbid. If the Arabs were to lay down their arms, there would be no more war. We don't seek war. We've always sought peace. From the very beginning we sought peace. We sought survival and peace. Israel must therefore always maintain its military superiority in the region. If not, it doesn't survive. It's that simple. You saw on October 7th what they want to do to us. If they could, they would. If they could do that to every single Jewish street in Israel, we know they would. The hatred is that great. The desire is that great. And the only reason we survive is because we're strong and because God. You take that away from us, we don't survive. With increased threats today, not only on its immediate borders, but we have now some non-Arab countries like Iran. Turkey is not our greatest friend. Israel must be stronger, not weaker.
But they're both Muslim countries.
They're non-Arab, but they're Muslim countries. So when we hear that Israel needs more arms, Israel needs another bill in the House and in the Senate to increase its arms, they're talking their survival. Because they live in a neighborhood that doesn't want them to be there. Even though, again, we did this last week, 27 Arab countries surround one little strip of land. During this uptick in anti-Semitism, and we've had these upticks before. A number of years ago, there was this uptick in Europe of anti-Semitism, and at that point, the German commissioner on anti-Semitism issued a declaration. This goes back a few years. And he thought he was saying something nice to the Jewish community to protect us. He was the commissioner on anti-Semitism for Germany, and he said that his suggestion is that Jews avoid wearing their kippahs in public. The government is advising that for your own safety, take off the kippah, especially in certain communities where you're not that welcome. His name was Felix Klein. However well-meaning he was with his precautionary warning, the mistake is that that's the exact slippery slope that gets us in trouble. When we start hiding, when we start running. Now, in response to Mr. Klein's recommendation, first Israel's president at the time, this is the prior president, his name was Reuven Rivlin, he called it a capitulation. He said, you're giving in to them. And we will never submit. We will never, he said, lower our gaze, and we will never react to anti-Semitism by being defeated. We're not doing that. Those days are over. And we ask for the governments of the world to follow suit. Don't ask us to hide anymore. Never again is never again. So a few days after this discussion between this commissioner on anti-Semitism of Germany and the response from the president of Israel, from Reuven Rivlin, Germany's most popular newspaper, it's called the Bild. It's a Yiddish word, but I guess it's a German word as well. They published on their front page of the newspaper a cutout kippah. A kippah, and that you were able to cut it out. And they encouraged all of their readers, non-Jews as well, to cut out the kippah and put it on their head that day, to show solidarity with the Jewish people. Feel comfortable wearing your kippah because we're going to join you. And encourage your children to do the same. And explain to the children the illness of anti-Semitism, the evil of anti-Semitism. Wear it, they wrote in this editorial, so that your friends and neighbors can see it. Explain to your children what the kippah is. And then they wrote, post a photograph of yourself wearing a kippah and put it on social media. Put it on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. Go out in the streets with it. Because if the commissioner's call to the Jewish community is allowed to stand, then we have again failed in the face of our history. That's a positive, powerful editorial. And I say the same today to the non-Jewish world as well. For those of you listening out there in the world to this talk that follow our classes that are not of the Jewish faith, you have a role to play in the fight against anti-Semitism. It's not just the Jews that need to stand up against anti-Semitism, it's all good people of the world. And so when you hear that there's demonstrations against Jews at universities, come out there. It's not just for the Jews to respond. It's for all good people of the world to respond to this hate. The days of submission and capitulation has to be behind us. I told this once before, and I'll repeat it again. I heard this from Rabbi Lau, the past chief rabbi of Israel. His son, Rabbi Lau, is the present chief rabbi of Israel, but I heard it from his father. He talked about many years ago in Ottawa, there was a debate that took place on the radio between the Israeli ambassador to Canada at the time, who was the late Dr. Yaakov Herzog, and with Professor Arnold Toynbee. Toynbee was a historian from Great Britain. He was not very fond of Israel, and there was this great debate that was going to take place between Rabbi Herzog and Professor Toynbee. And the argument being made was, by Toynbee, that the Jewish people are not a nation, and therefore they have no rights to a land of their own. That was his argument. They are a bunch of refugees, scattered from all over the world. You took a bunch of refugees, you put them in one pot. You're a religious sect at best, but that's not what the definition of a nation is. That was his argument. And he made it, he was an articulate speaker, he spoke well, he made his argument, and now it's Dr. Herzog's turn to respond. And I'll read you almost verbatim, but adding some language in of my own, Dr. Herzog's response on the radio to Professor Toynbee. You probably could go on Google and listen to the actual original debate, having the two of them speak. So Herzog says to Toynbee and to his audience, I want you to imagine the following scenario. Come with me. We're at the airport in Athens, Greece. This Olympic airline jet lands on the runway. On board is an old man. This old man was given permission by heaven to return to earth. He was allowed a pass to come and visit from heaven to earth. He was allowed to come and check out his native Athens to return. He disembarks the plane, and he's greeted by a steward. He's talking, but the steward doesn't understand a word this man is saying. They search high and low, and finally they find a translator who knows some ancient Greek. "Who are you?" the translator asks. He says, "I'm Socrates, the famous philosopher from Athens. I have come to check on my country, to check on my people. What can we do for you, Mr. Socrates?" He says, "Can you direct me to the Acropolis?" The Acropolis. The Acropolis is long in ruins. "Then let us go to the temple of Zeus. Any worship going on there today?" "Mr. Socrates, there is no temple of Zeus in Greek. There is a church here. It's a Greek Orthodox church, but it belongs to Christianity." How many countries are now under the control of the illustrious Greek Empire? He says none. Greece is a small country. Other than a small piece of geography, the Greece you're standing in today has nothing in common with the Greece that you and Aristotle and Plato knew. So Socrates gets right back on the plane. He's not interested. And he flies back. "Come with me," says Dr. Herzog to Professor Toynbee and his audience. "Let's make another stop." This time, it's an Alitalia flight, and it lands at an airport near Rome. Again, an old man disembarks. Again, this old man has been given permission by heaven to come back to earth for a visit. He's trying to communicate, but no one knows what he's talking about. He keeps pointing to himself, saying, "Julius Caesar, Julius Caesar." He's waiting for everyone to bow before him, but nobody does. And so they find some professor who knew some ancient Latin language of Rome, which of course has nothing in common today with the Italian language that people speak today. And Julius Caesar asks to be taken to the Colosseum so he can watch the fight of the gladiators. And the guy says, "Mr. Caesar, there's no gladiators going on. The Colosseum is still there, but it's a tourist attraction. Today you're primarily known as a salad. People have you as a salad. They have it with different types of dressing. Can we go to the temple of Jupiter?" Jupiter? Who's Jupiter? Here we have the Vatican. The Vatican is a church. It's a different religion altogether. It's called Catholicism. It has a pope. The present pope, he's from Latin America. The pope before, he was from Germany. The pope before, he was from Poland. How's the empire, the Roman Empire doing? Do we control all of the world or just 3/4 of the world? He says, they may say, when you're in Rome, do like the Romans, but we have no power over anybody. Ancient Rome is gone, history. It's the stuff of movies and history books. And so Julius Caesar gets back on his plane. So these two personalities, they come to visit their home cities, but it's nothing compared to the home cities they left behind. "Come with me," says Dr. Herzog, "for one more stop." And to Tel Aviv they go. And in El Al plane lands at the Ben Gurion airport. An old man steps off and he kisses the ground. A worker from the Ben Gurion airport sees this saintly looking man with a flowing white beard, and he walks over to him and he says, "Shalom Aleichem." And the guest responds, "Aleichem Shalom." They speak the same language. "Bruchim ha'aboyim," it's an honor to meet you. "What is your name?" He says, my name is Moshe. They called me Moshe Rabbeinu. Some call me Moses. Wow. The steward says, "My name is also Moshe. My name is Moshe Katzenberg. I live in Lud. I was born in Russia." Same name. "Have you been to Israel before?" he asks Moses. He says, "No, my first time. I've been dreaming about this day for a very, very long time." Ah, so this is not your homeland then. He says, oh, it is my homeland. Every single day of my life, I visualized every square inch of this land in my mind, in my heart, in my soul, even though I never stepped foot in it till today. Moses continues, my dear friend Moshe Katzenberg, may I ask a favor? Sure, whatever you want. I just flew through the night, and I realize now that it's morning that I don't have my tefillin with me. Tell me, is there any place here I can still find a pair of tefillin? Moshe Katzenberg says, of course. Everyone's got a pair of tefillin. You could use mine. Wow, beautiful. Tell me, do you also have a talit with the tzitzit? Of course, plenty. He says, I don't want to be a nudge, but is there any place nearby that they have a minyan, that I can pray with a minyan? He says, of course. This is our airport. We have 3 synagogues in the airport, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, and Hasidic. Any type you want, just come on with me. And they're walking into the synagogue in the Ben Gurion airport, and on the door, what do you see? A mezuzah. And Moses puts his hand on the mezuzah. It's the exact same mezuzah Moses taught the people in the wilderness exactly how to write, letter for letter, on the parchment. And he comes into the minyan and he takes out a talit and he puts on the talit. It's the exact same talit he instructed the Jewish people in the wilderness how to make. And he puts on the tefillin, the boxes with the leather straps, and it's exactly the same as it was when Moses instructed the Jewish people in the wilderness, that God is instructing us to put on the tefillin each and every single day. It happens to be a Monday, and on a Monday the Torah is taken out during the morning service. And they take out the Torah. It's the exact same Torah that Moses gave over to us, with 304,805 letters, exactly the same. Moses comes up to the Torah and he makes a blessing on the Torah. Asher bachar banu mikolo amim v'nasan lanu Torah emes, the same blessing we've been saying for thousands of years. Says Ambassador Herzog to Professor Toynbee and to anyone listening to this debate. Same religion for thousands of years. Same language for thousands of years. Same faith. Same commandments. Same homeland. If this is not a nation, tell me, Professor, what is a nation? I remember one of our tours to Israel, community tour that we did. Our tour guide, his name was Jonathan Deitch. Jonathan, if you're listening, hello. He stays in touch. And we had a nice busload of people from Conejo Valley. And he's showing us this mountain, what happened to be here, and this beautiful scene, and this beautiful scene. And at some point he says, look, it's very hard talking to a group from California about the beautiful scenery, because you guys live with beautiful scenery all around you. He says in Hebrew, Avol zeh shalanu, but this is ours. This is ours. I want you to think about that. The enemy that attacks us, Hamas, and Hezbollah now every single day, and Iran who's behind it, what exactly do they want? Usually in a conventional war, the enemy has objectives. They want a conquest of land. They want our resources. They want our power. They want our money. What is the objective of the enemy and the terrorists that we deal with today? What do they want? What will satisfy them? What would take for these attacks on our people to stop? We know these ceasefires are foolish. It won't stop. We've been through so many ceasefires. We've been through UN objectives. We've been through resolutions. We've been through peace talks and negotiations. They don't make any secret. You just have to look in their charter and they say it's not a conflict over land. If it was a conflict over land, they would have accepted the deal in 1948. They would have accepted the deal in 1967. They would have accepted every single deal that they were offered Palestinian states. They've never accepted it because what they want is not a piece of land. They want to wipe us off the face of the map. Their slogan, from the river to the sea, is exactly what they want. Only most of the ignoramuses on our college campuses that are chanting it have no idea what river we're talking about or what sea we're talking about. This is what it says in their charter. Israel will exist and continue to exist until Islam will obliterate it just as it obliterated others before it. That's it. That's what they want. So as Jews, we abhor war. But when there is a sworn enemy who challenges our very right to exist, then war against this enemy is an act of peace. It's an act of compassion. It's an act of preserving life. Any fear-minded, sane, civilized person understands that when you are attacked, when your home is violated, when your children are kidnapped, when your daughters are raped, when your babies' heads are cut off, you have an obligation to fight. Everybody understands that the most basic and fundamental rule of nationhood is that when your borders are breached, when your cities are bombed, when your citizens are killed, you must mount a vigorous defense if you want to remain a nation. Otherwise, you don't exist as a nation. If you allow this to happen and you don't respond with strength, with resolve, you don't exist. You don't survive, especially not in that neighborhood of the world. But what I'm talking about is beyond our right. Beyond our entitlement to defend ourselves. That goes without saying. What I'm talking about is a psyche of the Jew. That's what needs to change, and I believe has changed since October the 7th. That we stand up tall and proud, unambiguously, unapologetically, unequivocally, without compromise, with confidence, with pride, and with firm, and we declare to the world, Zeh Shalanu. This is our land. We don't apologize for it. We don't have an add-on sentence or parentheses or buts. This is our land. We make no excuses and apologies for it. We are there because we belong there, and we will remain there. Amen. The more we understand this, the more we recognize it, the more we internalize it, the more we're able to proclaim it, the more the world will understand and ultimately respect it. I'll close with two stories. In 1960, in a daring operation, the Israeli Mossad captured Adolf Eichmann. Yamach Shemai. This beast animal of a man was the architect of the Nazis' final solution. And the Mossad captured him, I believe it was in Argentina.
Yes.
And they transported him to Israel. And he stood trial in Israel in 1961 for his crimes. Ultimately, he was executed in May of 1962. Israel rarely has a death penalty, but it makes exceptions for Nazi war criminals. The months of the trial, as the trial was going on, was very traumatic for the Holocaust survivors in Israel and around the world, because of the prosecution questions of prying into understanding what was the goal, what did Hitler want, what was done to the Jews. And they had to relive so many memories of what this man put their brothers and their sisters and their fathers and their mothers and their uncles and aunts through. Throughout the entire ordeal of the trial leading up to the execution, there was one man that was charged with the task of guarding Eichmann, and he was the man that ultimately carried out the execution. The identity of this Mossad agent was classified up until June of 2004. After his retirement from the Mossad, his name was released. He happens to be a Yemenite Jew, and he happens to be an observant Jew. I believe on Netflix there is a documentary about this Mossad agent. Upon learning of his identity, the main news TV station in Germany called him and asked if they can interview him about the year that he spent guarding Eichmann. They wanted an interview. After much reluctance, this man said, I will agree to be interviewed, but there's one condition. I insist that the interview takes place in the morning, and it takes place outside in front of the Western Wall. That's where I go to pray every morning. You want to meet me there with a camera crew? I'll let you interview me. So the producer said, thank you so much. It's beautiful that you're agreeing to do this, but we have rented in Tel Aviv a beautiful studio. It's air conditioned. Trying to explain to this Yemenite Jew about sound control, volume control, but we will have a limousine pick you up. If you want to find a synagogue in Tel Aviv, we'll take you there to pray, and then we'll bring you back to the studio. We'll serve you kosher food. We'll take care of all your needs. But an interview like this should be done inside a sound studio. So he said, that's my one condition, and I'm not budging from it. That's it. Yes, at the Western Wall. If no, no interview. That's it. No negotiations. So they gave in. They had no choice. The camera crew comes to the Western Wall in the morning. They set up a chair for him to sit, and the interview begins. The man tells of the details of those months with Eichmann under his charge. How layers of guards guarded others who guarded others who guarded Eichmann. Why? Because everyone wanted to kill him. And so he needed protection from the masses within Israel, even within the Israeli army and security and police and security guards in the prisons that wanted to have the quote-unquote honor of ripping him to pieces. But Israel wanted the trial. Israel wanted the testimony. They felt the world needed to know. And so in order to do so, Eichmann needed to be protected by all means. And so they literally set up circles, watching others, with Eichmann in the middle, and me, this simple Mossad agent, always by Eichmann's side. I was the one right next to him. So if they got through it all, I was the last man. No food was Eichmann allowed to eat without me tasting it first. They waited 3 minutes after I swallowed for Eichmann to have permission to eat it. Now when they set this up, I asked my superior, and if they poison me, that's okay? So he said, you we can replace, him we can't. So 3 minutes, because they figured that's how much time it would take for the body to feel that there was some poison in the food. And then if I survive for 3 minutes, Eichmann can eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Anyway, this was part of the whole interview as to what it was like taking care and literally living with Eichmann for these few months. At the end of this fascinating interview, the interviewer from Germany said, I have one last question. There will be millions of people in Germany watching this historic interview. Why did you insist that it be here? Why not in a studio? There's a lot of noise here, there's a lot of tumult here. Why wouldn't you have wanted this in a TV studio? And the man replied, just 1 generation ago, Germany attempted to extinguish our people. I wanted all of Germany to see with their own eyes, from the heartbeat of the Jewish world, from our eternal capital of Jerusalem, from the front of our kotel, from the western wall, that we are alive and well, and that we will live on forever. And he concluded with the 3 words, Am Yisrael Chai. I said 2 stories, so I have 1 closing story, and that's the closing story for this semester. And I want to thank all of you, because this year has been a different type of year for our classes, because most of our classes have been intertwined with what's going on in Israel. And so it was our time, so to say, to share our grief and our resolve together. Gideon Katz, Gidi as he was known, was the most respected jet fighter pilot in the Israeli Air Force. He was admired for his sharp and lightning quick instincts. He was what we call in our country a top gun. Everyone knew of Gidi. Gidi was one of the best flyers they had. His personality sort of matched his military record in that he kept his emotions in check. He always maintained an even keel, always prepared for his next mission. From his teen years, Gidi Katz always took a strong interest in the Holocaust. His grandmother, Savta Bruria, was a survivor. Now, she never spoke much about what it was like in the concentration camps, but Gidi knew that his grandmother was one of the survivors of the concentration camps, and so the Holocaust was always high on his mind. One day, Gidi's commanding officer approached him with an offer. He said the IDF was giving its soldiers a chance to travel to Europe to see the concentration camps and to tour the places where some of the famous battles of World War II took place. And Gidi was being invited, would you like to go? As a side note, those of you from Israel know this, especially those of you that served in the IDF, all of those that in the beginning of their training today in Israel in the IDF are taken to Yad Vashem. They go through the Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem because they want them to understand what it is that they're fighting for, the contrast of what was to what is now. And many of the places in Israel where there are memorials, you will always find a lot of hundreds of soldiers that are in their training time. When I went just a few weeks ago in the southern border to the site of the music festival, where I told you there were a bunch of memorials there, it was packed with youngsters that are in training for the IDF because, again, they want them to see what our enemies want to do to us. So Gidi took on this trip, and although he wasn't religious, his mother gave him a small book of Psalms, a Tehillim book. Take it along, keep it in your pocket. Look, maybe when you're going to these places, you'll be in the mood, you'll want to say a prayer, here's one. So like if you've ever seen, this is like what a small book of Psalms looks like. It's a small book. Gidi was respectful to his mother. He took the prayer book, put it in his pocket, doubted he would ever use it because he wasn't religious. He never really read from the books of the prayers. And the tour takes this group of Israeli military men to the main concentration camps in their surrounding cities. After touring some of the larger cities, they stopped off in a smaller place called Stutthof. And although it was not a well-known concentration camp as the others, it was a brutal camp. It was used as a killing camp. And 85,000 of our people were murdered in the Stutthof concentration camp. The soldiers walked through the eerie grounds of Stutthof, and Gidi is taken in the experience, horrified by the abysmal living conditions and surprised that so many have lost their lives in what was a relatively small camp in comparison to the larger ones that they saw on the tour. He saw Auschwitz, he saw Treblinka. He never heard about Stutthof until that day. So he tried to imagine what life was like for those that lived here temporarily, never knowing if that day was their last day on earth. He passes through the barracks and he sees a building in the distance that grabbed his attention. He approaches it and he's shocked that Stutthof had their own gas chamber. And he finds himself standing in the gas chamber of Statov. The tour guide told them that although the camp was originally built as a labor and prisoner of war camp, it eventually became a big part of the final solution. Jews were sent there just to be put into this gas chamber. As soon as he walked into the gas chamber, he felt like he was suffocating. Because in his mind, he's imagining what happened in this room. He tried to imagine the tens of thousands that had their last breath right where he was standing. Instead of feeling this impulse at that time to cry or to want revenge, he felt a very strange emotion. He felt like he wanted to sing, that he wanted to demonstrate resolve. And he was dealing in his mind, like, why am I feeling this way? Sadness, I would understand. Revenge, I would understand. But the desire to sing right now is very strange. And again, Giddy wasn't an emotional fellow, and suddenly he's overcome by this emotion that he needs to sing something. Reaches to his pocket, and he has a Tehillim there. He doesn't really read through this, but his Jewish memory, his most favorite Jewish memory, was going with his father to synagogue on Simchat Torah. That's what he remembers the most. And on Simchat Torah, they would take in his synagogue the Torah scrolls. You ever see them lift it way high as they're dancing? He doesn't have a Torah scroll. He has this little book. So he holds up his Tehillim way high, and he starts dancing outside the concentration camp, inside the concentration camp, outside the gas chambers of Statov. The only song he remembers is Sisu v'simchu b'simchat Torah. It's not Simchat Torah that day, but he remembers this flashback memory of dancing with his father in the synagogue, holding a Torah scroll high in the air, singing the words, Sisu b'simcho b'simchat Torah, and that's what he's doing. He knows it's strange, but that's what his emotion is taking him to. While he's doing this, his phone rings. It's his mother. Giddy, how are you? He says, Mom, Ima, you're not going to believe what's going on. I'm in a place you probably never heard of. It's called Statov. And I'm having these very strange feelings. As soon as he says the word Statov, his mother says, you need to call my mother. Call Savta Buria, call her now. Tell her where you are. So he right away calls his grandmother. Savta, this is Giddy. And his grandmother's all excited to hear his voice, surprised by the phone call, since they didn't always speak on a regular basis. He tells his grandmother, I was on the phone with Ima, and I told her that I'm in Statov, and she said I need to call you right away. And his grandmother says, Statov, I know all about Statov. I was there. I was there with my whole family. And with that, it was quiet. After a few minutes, Giddy says to his grandmother, I was walking around the camp and I saw the barracks and I heard from the tour guide the horrific conditions, now knowing that you and my family lived in these conditions. And when I walked into the gas chambers, the oddest feeling came over me. I felt the need to sing and to dance. And I know you must think it's totally bizarre, but I stepped out of the gas chambers and I began dancing right next to the crematorium. Ima gave me this small Tehillim to carry with me, and I'm dancing with it as if it's Simchat Torah. At this point, Giddy hears his grandmother crying. And he realizes how emotional this must be for her to relive being in this concentration camp. So he starts apologizing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get into the details. I'm sorry, this must be so painful. And she says, no, these are not sad tears. These are happy tears. I'm happy you're there. I'm happy you got to see where I lived for a time. I'm happy that you're in the place where so many of our family took their last breath. It's good that someone from the family is there today. Especially someone like you that's fighting for the survival of Israel. And then she told Gideon's story. I was 10 years old when I was taken to Stotov. I knew that my father, Gideon, who you're named after, he had a job in the camp. I found out that he was from what they called the Sonderkommando. Those were the prisoners that were forced to remove the dead bodies from the gas chambers and bring the bodies from the gas chambers to the crematorium. That was his job. That's what my father, your great-grandfather, did in Stotov. One night, after a full day of this horrific work, my father stepped outside with the others in his group, and when the German Nazi officer stepped away for a cigarette break, my father spoke to the others. And he said, these Nazis have taken away our sense of humanity. We have been transformed into animals. But today, tonight, is Simchat Torah. Even if it's difficult, let us dance and let us sing so that we remind ourselves who we are, that we're Jews, that we're children of the Almighty. And so they stood right outside the gas chambers. My father had one torn page of a siddur that he had saved in his pocket. And they danced and they sang, singing the words, Sisu v'simchu b'simchat Torah. Rejoice and exult in the joy of the Torah. Now Gidi broke down crying because he realizes that his great-grandfather stood at this exact spot some 60 years earlier, singing the exact song that somehow his great-grandfather is communicating with him right now and telling him, Gidi, dance and sing right here and sing this song. He couldn't help but be inspired by this experience, which started and began a spiritual journey for Gideon when he came back to Israel. He knew what he needed to do, to be there on this front line for Israel and to attach himself to his Jewish heritage. Ladies and gentlemen, everyone here and listening, remember this. We are not a broken people. We've all been through this in history before. We have not responded with revenge or with hate. We built families, we built communities, we revived our land, we brought goodness into this world wherever we found ourselves. There is no greater victory against Hitler, Yamach Shemai. There is no greater victory against Stalin, against Hamas, against Iran, against Hezbollah, against all the enemies of the Jewish people, that we can give them than to live as proud and strong and connected Jews. That is the ultimate, greatest victory that we can show. That is the greatest defeat for our enemies, that we stand tall. We are all survivors, whether our parents or grandparents were in the concentration camps or not. Every Jew today throughout the world is a survivor. We are all the continuation of the greatest story in the history of mankind. So we respond with strength, we respond with courage, we respond with pride, and we respond with resolve. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you.